So, in a sane time, this would be surprising. Sadly, not so much. Here's the headline. Leaked emails show Canadian media exec demanding journalists to avoid using the term terrorist in Hamas coverage. And I guess suddenly, for some reason, the CBC has developed some restraint. Odd that. And this was sent to CBC employees from George Achi, the Director of Journalistic Standards with CBC News. And that was sent midday Saturday. What did it say? Do not refer to militant soldiers or anyone else as terrorists. The notion of terrorism remains heavily politicized and is part of the story. Even when quoting or clipping a government or a source referring to fighters as terrorists, we should add context to ensure that the audience understands this is opinion, not fact. That includes statements from the Canadian government and Canadian politicians. So this is all about fact-checking, right? And make sure that they put the quotes on even when it's statements from the Canadian government and Canadian politicians. Well, that's interesting because Hamas is listed as a terrorist organization by the Canadian government. So it wouldn't really be that surprising if the Canadian government and Canadian politicians referred to them as terrorists, considering that the Canadian government officially considers Hamas to be a terrorist group. Well, I guess the CBC needs to get even better at fact-checking. Or maybe just stop calling it fact-checking and just call it narrative control, because we already know that's what you're doing. Here, let me show you something that the CBC is probably not going to do a story on. Let's go to the Hamas Charter. Well, there's some interesting things in here. This is from Wikipedia, by the way. Let's see, in Article 7 here, it says it adds a hadith claiming that at the Day of Judgment, all Jews will be killed. That sounds a tad genocidal, doesn't it? Let's see, Article 13 of the Hamas Charter. There is no negotiated settlement possible. Jihad is the only answer. Gee, this thing gets pretty dark, doesn't it? Oh, here's one for all the feminists out there. Article 18 defines the role of women as homemakers and child rearers, providing education and moral guidance to men. But I think that maybe Wiki left a little bit out of this one. And if you go and read the full Article 18, it actually goes into a little bit more detail of how the role is to be good homemakers and child rearers to raise fighters. Maybe some people might call them terrorists. So, the feminist dream, right? Having your body be used as a jihadi-making machine. Now, in this Hamas Charter, and also Covenant, as it's also called, they have the Hamas Credo. Would you like to know what that is? And this quotes a saying of Muhammad from a hadith. The day of judgment will not come until Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, O Muslim, O servant of God, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him. Only the Garked tree would not do that, because it is one of the trees of the Jews. And again, you're not going to see this on the CBC. And that's because the CBC is left. It's far left, as a matter of fact. And of course, the left never lets reality get in the way of a good narrative. Now, we all know what happened there. We've all seen the images. We know what happened. If you can't call that terrorist or terrorism, you're just not being honest. This isn't a matter of perspective. I mean, when you commit those kinds of crimes against civilians, I'm sorry, you're the bad guy. And no amount of moral relativism can change that. And in all of these CBC stories that I've looked at, yeah, it's all just narrative control. I mean, there's only so far they can go because the reality is so horrific. And the fact remains that in Hamas's own charter, they state explicitly what they want to do, and it is genocide, explicitly so. Hamas itself is labeled as a terrorist group by the Canadian government itself. It's all out in the open, and we can see the horrors that this group commits with our own eyes. If you can't call that terrorism, you're just morally unqualified to comment. Anyway, this is all just par for the course for the CBC. Personally, I think they should be defunded. What do you think? Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Please subscribe, like, and share. Sharing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.